Welcome to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL, 950 AM, 100.3 FM. And you can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. Well, today, of course, is Independence Day here in the United States, the 4th of July. And it's the time that we remember that the Declaration of Independence was signed. And of course, this is an extremely powerful document, and obviously those of us here in Massachusetts have quite a familiarity with it. If you've ever been to Quincy, Massachusetts, you will see right in the town center is the Church of the Presidents, which is, according to history, the church that John Adams attended. It is a Unitarian church, and it's important to understand why. And the reason is the Unitarians are the more liberal wing of what eventually began as the Puritans. And the Puritans separated into two separate churches. One of them became the Congregationalists, and the other ones became the Unitarians. So it is a Unitarian church, and it's also known as the Church of the Presidents. So, obviously, as we all know, Massachusetts has an extremely strong history, even though the Declaration of Independence was signed in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. But it's important to recognize what this was all about. We all know the basic story. It was the people coming together. And by the way, it was not a majority of people who were living in the colonies at the time. It was only, I think, about 30%. Most people were not interested in separating from England. But it was this very vocal band of leaders who were, as we all know, just, number one, it can be honestly said by divine providence that these minds came together, and they all came together, and they recognized the issue was it was time to put an end to despotic governments. I did an interview several years ago with Robert Riley, and he's a fascinating guy to talk to. It was a print interview because if it was a radio interview, you know how I separate my interviews into 10-minute sections. I think I would have had a whole month of material from Robert Riley. He was fascinating to speak to, and he was actually talking in his subject of the Catholic background of the Declaration of Independence. But I'm not going to get necessarily into that. I'm going to get into the basic principles there. What you were dealing, obviously, was a concept of the divine right of kings. And what that really means is that the divine right of kings was that the kings had the right to do pretty much anything they wanted in their being the despots, as they were called in the Declaration of Independence, in running their governments. And it's at this point, building on such philosophy as John Locke and others, the writers of the Declaration of Independence, including, of course, Thomas Jefferson, says that this has no place anymore. And it really is a form of evolution that occurs, where it is now a whole different understanding of how we live as human beings within a governmental reality. So it's a pretty powerful declaration that they made, where they're actually bringing an end to the despotism that came out of the divine right of kings, which is not a Catholic concept. And in doing so, they come to a whole different understanding where the people run the government because they're the ones who have to consent to the government. And they detail in the Declaration of Independence, which I'm sure you've read, but they detail in the Declaration of Independence the focus on the king. So what they're doing is he has done this. He has done this. If we actually go to the actual text and we can look at just some of the stuff. He has dissolved the representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of people. Another one, he has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. So we see these powerful words where he has done these things. He has, and so the focus is on the king. And the writers of the Declaration of Independence, the fathers of our church, of our country, the fathers of our country are basically coming down and saying, enough. We're not putting up with this. You don't have the right to treat us this way. And of course, keep in mind, this was going on where it took weeks to go to England, to Europe from the United States, and it wasn't at that point, the colonies, and it wasn't a very easy journey. We're going to talk more about this on the other side of the break. You're listening to St. Anthony, the voice of St. Anthony Parish, in fact, and from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL. We'll be right back right after this. Don't forget to tell others where they can find our program. You can hear us on WROL 950 AM and WROLradio.com at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. We then podcast the program on your favorite podcast platform and at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also hear us at our parish website, StAnthonyAlston.org. That is StAnthonyAlston.org. Let others know where you can find us and spread the word about the Catholic Audio Media podcast. And don't forget that you have a standing invitation to our 10 o'clock a.m. Mass every single Sunday. So come check that out. We're at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134 if you are looking for the actual zip code where you can find us. If you are a baby boomer or so and you happen to remember the term or the program Zoom, remember they used to sing that zip code, which WGBH is no longer in that zip code. They're in the next one, 02135. But that's our zip code, and that's about where you can find us. So I interviewed Robert Riley, and his book was called, is still called actually, America on Trial, A Defense of the Founding. It's published by Ignatius Press. It came out in 2020. And he served in the office of the Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush, and he was also one time the head of Voice of America. And he was the one who was bringing out that a lot of what ultimately came out as forming the United States grew out of a lot of issues that was actually Catholic. It's believed, as he wrote, that the divine right of kings was a Catholic concept, but it's not. It actually came from William of Ockham, and it started there. It actually didn't come directly from there, but it started there, and it worked its way through because William of Ockham believed in the idea, and a lot of Christians may believe this, that God is God. And so God doesn't have to follow any certain rules because he's God. He can do whatever he wants. Whereas the Catholic belief, which is why we believe in natural law, is that God created the world and formed it with a certain order, and God himself will follow that order. And so that's why Catholics have a very strong focus on natural law. Now, natural law, actually, you look at that and say, well, that's not Catholic. No, actually, it has its roots in Aristotle and before Aristotle, actually. And the idea of natural law is that if you look at nature, it kind of follows a certain pattern, and therefore that is natural law. And all our laws should be based on this certain pattern. So the idea that God can do anything he wants, so today he can decide that can decide that all people with brown hair will go to heaven, and tomorrow he can decide that, no, I changed my mind. All people with blonde hair will go to heaven. That's an extreme example. That is not what we as Catholics believe. And I'm not saying any Christian faith believes that. I'm just giving that as an extreme example of an idea that God can do whatever he wants. Whereas what we believe is that God follows natural law because he created natural law. We have a thing called grace builds upon nature, and people will ask that all the time. Well, how does God do this? Grace builds upon nature. So what the writers of the Declaration of Independence is saying, we don't need this divine right of kings. This doesn't make any sense in a world where we believe in natural law. Now, granted, they didn't follow natural law perfectly themselves, because we all know that they believed in slavery. And when you say all men are created equal, and then you say you believe in slavery, you can go, those two things are contradictory. And that's a fact as well, and we understand that. And so today we can realize, no, that doesn't make any sense to say all men are created equal or all are created equal, but certain people are less equal than other people. That's literally an oxymoron. But we see that's the beginning of a total change in our world. We'll talk more tomorrow. Have a blessed day. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.